Today we're going to do brake pads and rotors front on a 2014 Ford F-150. First thing, take the wheels off. It's 21 millimeter. Got a couple of 21 millimeters on the back side of these calipers. Get one of these hangers in there. A lot of times there's a little slot in the frame that you can hang that in. Just kind of make sure that there's not too much tension on that line. Line the new one up, and then we will change the pads in the caliper, stick it back on, bolt it back up. The pads, you can just push out of their retainers, and as long as everything is in decent shape, not bent up on the clips and retainers, you can just reuse them. Pull that second pad out. If you want to kind of pay attention to the orientation of the pad, that way when your new one comes up here, you know which way to stick it in. So after you get the old pads out, then you need to bolt this frame back up to the spindle around the rotor without pads in, and then we will undo the actual cylinders of the caliper and take it out of the frame so that we can compress the pistons. This one has two. You got to compress these pistons before you can load the brake pads in and be able to fit over the rotor. Always when you're putting new pads on, you have to compress them. So we're gonna pull this off the hanger and attach the caliper frame back to the spindle. That's gonna be those 21s. Just tightening those two bolts down again. Bottom one and the top one. After you get those tight, then you take these caliper bolts loose, which is two 13 millimeters. Probably leave the bottom one in, take the top one out, and then you can just rock this back. And actually, brake line's gonna hold it tight, so I'll have to take them both out just to get enough room to put the new pads in and also compress those cylinders. If you've never used one of these caliper compressing tools, they're pretty handy, inexpensive. You got to slip this plate over the handle. A little hard to do with one hand, but slip it down like that. And then there's basically a back plate for it to push against. Sorry. You look in the kit and you find whatever one looks like it's gonna work. This one, there's no holes or grooves or anything for it to lock against, so you can just get the one that's flat like this. There's a couple of dowels on the end of this so that the plate can sit on there and it can be held in position. Because what you're doing is you're tightening this screw against that piston. That's what it should look like after you get everything kind of snugged up. And then you just crank on this end handle and it will reverse thread. So you may have to hold this nut right here with a wrench, but then you crank counterclockwise and it will compress that piston. So after a few turns, that's what it's looked like. You compress that piston down to flush, and then you put a second one in here and push it down, because if you take this one off and try to compress this one, that one will come back. Brake fluid is in a closed system, and you will drive whatever is the freest component out, which this has no pad to push against, so it's the freest. It'll be popping back out. A couple other methods you could use is you can just get a normal old C-clamp and if you fit it around here, or you can use a large pair of channel locks. Compress it like that. Okay, so now that you got your pistons compressed, you should be able to put the new pads in. And a little easier to see now. You line those slots up, just press them up against the rotor. You get them as tight as you can, so when you slip that caliper back over, you're gonna have to have one of your 13mm bolts ready, so that as soon as the caliper is in position, you can start the bolt and hold it in place. With the pistons compressed, you have all kinds of clearance now, so this easily fit over. Slide it back down. Start the second bolt. You're gonna tighten these 13s, put the wheel back on, and that's how you do pads and a rotor on a 2014 F150.